Welcome to Leaning In, a space for curious conversation and active engagement. I, Tanya Mikvitz,
and I, Jessica Lusty, invite you to lean into life together, exploring what it means to live into transformational practices in our day-to-day lives as we engage in relationships, family dynamics, our conditioning, and the narratives of dominant culture.
How do we actually embody change in our own lives and as a collective?
In this, our Being Together episode, we begin to lay the foundations for how we will be with one another and the aspects of life that we take up in these spaces. We orient ourselves here in ways that support us and those who engage with us to remember and reconnect with ways of being in relationship with ourselves and the beings that we reside among, to resource, nourish, inspire, inform, and guide us. To relate beyond an individualistic orientation towards the psyche, situating or perhaps resituating our well-being within a collective context, attending to the ways that we are interdependent, being curious about and learning through the differences and sometimes contradictory positions that exist within us and between us, to identify dominant narratives and the ways that they embody and enact through us, increasing our capacity to challenge them when it serves our personal and collective healing and transformation to do so. And to listen in ways that support understanding, mutual regard, and collective care. So let's dive in to being together.
So welcome. We are so happy to be with you here for our second episode of Leaning In. And we are going to take this episode and this time to really try and set the scene of what we are hoping to do in this space. So one of our deep intentions is to create a space where we can be in conversation with more subtlety, more nuance, and bringing forth a more layered experience. And to do that, we really need to kind of name the waters that we're swimming in, which is the dominant culture, which is conditioning all of us. And we want to make it really clear that we want to be in a space where we perhaps challenge the assumptions made within that dominant culture. As we know, the world is not in a good place, right? The world is not healthy. Humans are not healthy on the whole. And we need to find new ways forwards, right? So what we're hoping to do is to create a space where we can speak to our experiences, where we can challenge the norms that we've been shaped by, and just be in conversation with each other around all of that and how we experience the world. So
yeah, thanks, Tanya. I really appreciate that. And I think for both of us to take this time as we're starting out to make explicit some of the things that we hope to engage, or the ways or the places from which we will be engaging and we'll be inviting you to engage, so that is clear, and so that we can all be have a sense of of course we'll discover other things along the way, but have a sense of sort of knowing the how of what we're doing and kind of having a feel for, as Tanya said, the waters that we're swimming in. So we wanted to lay out some of the assumptions that we're holding here. And one of those is that this thing that we're experiencing, this amazing collective experience that we're having of physical life, of tasting, of touching, of smelling, of feeling, of being together, of creating relationship together, of creating lives that reflect, a sense of value and purpose and excitement and dream, and like express the longings that we have as relational beings for connection and for intimacy, that is a dance that's unfolding in this place among beings, all beings, human, more than human, things that, the Western modernist culture might even consider to be an inert objects, that have no life to them, that we're really operating under assumption that everything we encounter here is imbued with a creative intelligence, and that the levels and qualities and kinds of relationships, of exchanges that we can have in this world with one another and with all that we encounter is very rich. And that there are possibilities for knowing and sensing and getting feedback from the world that we live in, that shares information about who we are and the path that we're on and how we can be together in ways that support collective care are all around us. And that this dance is what we are wanting to create a fuller spectrum of capacity to be in relationship with. Because I don't know about you, but I feel that my sense of that is often opened up through experiences, and has been since I was a little girl, and then shut down by other experiences and messages that came from the outside that sort of looked askew or called into question in ways that invalidated my own sense of, what was happening within me and between me and the world that I was in. So this idea that this dance is unfolding within us and between us, and it's shaped within place, right, where we come up and where we're raised and we're brought up, and that varies, right? An urban landscape, a suburban landscape, a rural landscape is going to imbue a person growing up in that with a different quality of lens on the world, and condition us in different ways about being in relationship. And that all of that matters, and it all is present with us. It's presence through us when we are together. And so what does that mean, right? And how do we come to better understand that and know that? And these are like the questions and the curiosities that we want to explore here together. What are the familial and the cultural and the social experiences and conditioning that shapes us, and it shapes the way we relate to one another, the way we feel in spaces, peopled spaces that we step into, the sense of possibility we have for the kinds of relationships that we can be in with different kinds of people and different beings that we encounter, and to open that up, right? So we expand the kinds of possibilities, the range of possibility for quality of relationship and for quality of care and community. And that we value all beings. We place a high value on the human, the more than human, the imaginal, the archetypal, right? That there are all of these different variety of beings that exist in different ways that have an impact on us, and we have an impact on them, right? And what is that space, and how can we explore that space of interface in a way that allows for more richness, more color, more vibrancy, more feeling, and more possibilities for ourselves and the world. That we really value equity among all beings and ways of being in relationship that do support collective care, that disrupt relational powers and relational patterns that are based on differentials of power that come through culture, that come through dominant systems. Like, this is something that we have come, I think both Tanya and I have come to understand, that And that's one of the reasons why we bring this space forward in the way we are, that our personal healing and transformation is deeply embedded within these collective systems. It's not separate. We aren't individuals. We are powerfully linked and interconnected from a psychological standpoint and spiritual standpoint, a physical standpoint, an energetic standpoint with one another. And we really want to challenge the things that situate us in ways that create discord and resistance and opposition to one another. And, this assumption that we're bringing is that we can experience the fullest spectrum of understanding and intimacy and possibility by expanding our capacity to hold multiple interpretations at the same time. And this includes like the different interpretations that are within us, right? Because so often I know I become sort of paralyzed if I get locked into an interpretation that is active in a moment, perhaps a moment of intensity that may be driven by a younger version of myself or a fearful version of my conditioning, right? Or a messaging that I have deeply internalized that comes online and causes me to focus on one interpretation of something. And so what are the skills that can help me to recognize that's happening and open that up? And like, that's part of what we want to hold here, is like, how can we really hold the position of multiple interpretations at the same time? And that multiple forms of perception are valid, right? I grew up in a culture, certainly, that placed on a pedestal the logical, the rational, the linear, the cognitive way of knowing that was elevated above the intuitive, the creative, the embodied, the gut sense, the intelligence and the knowing that comes from our physicalness, our creatureliness, right? So opening that up and really bringing our capacity to inquire into our experiences in the world, our experiences within ourselves, with one another, from all of those senses of knowing that creative and imaginal are valid and valuable as the cognitive and the logical. So that is an assumption we're really bringing strongly here. And I'm just curious with that, Tanya, like, are there any examples that you can think of for yourself that where sort of some of those ways of being in relationship with the world were impinged upon, like as you came of age, where you grew up?
Yeah, I think it's really I really love how you put this forward, and I think one of the things is that really it's about a remembering, that we want to create a space where we have the opportunity to remember almost more parts of ourselves. I love that in the yoga tradition, there is this word smarana, and it's remembrance, so that when we do the practices, it's not like we discover a new part of ourselves or something new or a newer experience. We're coming in to remember who we are. And in a way, that is exactly what we're hoping to do here. It's like we come into this world, and on some level, we have all the understanding, but then because we are conditioned and contained within the environments where we come into, within the family environment, the cultural environment, the geographical environment, and so forth, that is going to shape us. And one of our most inherent kind of desires as humans is to belong. So we want to fit in with whatever is being placed upon us. And I feel like, I have a lot of memory of myself as very young, which really doesn't sit with, who I was, then in pre-teen years, for instance. Like there was like a big shift of adjustment. So I think when you were speaking about, early memories and how we relate to the world, and how we relate in all the different ways of being. I was, as I mentioned before, I grew up in Finland. I spent a lot of time in the summers in the archipelago, out in the countryside, barefoot, basically. And my relationship to like the forest and the earth was so immediate. And now it's like a family joke, but like my best friend was this rock. It still is. But it was like there was life that I related to that in a way was so natural, and it just existed. But of course then it's like, well, that's not real. This is what we're told. It's fantasy. It's in the same way that, oh well, that's just a story. But in a way, all the stories that we are told and that we continue to tell, the archetypal stories, are real, right? Because they are a collective holding. They are something, and they're a perspective of how we understand the world. So the and the just these ideas that things can have to be proven, or things have to be, real or not real. That what we're hoping here is to once again expand our awareness and have a space where we can really welcome the different parts of our experience, right? And that even within us there are multiple stories weaving at the same time. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of how I feel about what you've said, or what comes forward. And I feel like it's um, coming into a more expanded awareness, which then is more embracing.
I'm curious if you would, just in the spirit of sort of like engaging practice in this space, would you be open to just dropping in for a moment and just like allowing yourself to journey a little bit into sort of that perspective that was more alive for you when you were a young girl barefoot in the forest, and just see what comes in this moment that might enrich where you're situated right now today? Yeah. Okay. So take a moment and just let your eyes soften, and just let your belly soften. Just feel your breath without needing to change anything, and perhaps feeling the back of your body, just feeling that sense of a continuum of time just kind of opening up behind you, and you're able to just sort of fall back a little bit through the years and find yourself there on the island, and perhaps just sitting as you would with your rock, however that might be. I'm going to offer you a few incomplete sentences and just complete them as spontaneously as comes natural. What I'm immediately feeling as I place myself with my rock is
this very welcoming holding of the earth. And I can smell I can smell the earth. I can smell the moss. It feels soft. And then I feel the rock face as well. It feels very safe.
just allowing yourself to settle a little bit more into that holding, that being, that safety, and that visceral experience of the fragrances and the textures and the temperatures. As I allow myself to settle a little bit more into the presence of the rock and the earth and being held, what I'm noticing is
I want to play. and that this is my space to play, that I'm co-creating a world. Everything is very close to me, immediate for me.
Where I would love to bring this quality of just immediacy of being, creativity, and of play that I feel so present with here, where I'd love to bring that more into my current life, my current day-to-day is.
Into my close relationship, into like stripping away the what I carry through day to day, what I carry through, what has just been, what's to be, what I'm planning, what I'm processing, and having this immediacy of appreciation relationally.
Just
Yes.
imagine that. Yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, just a sense of the sense of joy in that, like joy and ease in being that immediate flow with what is present.
Where I feel that, where I feel the qualities that I'm experiencing with the rock, where I feel them resonating the most within my own body in this moment is.
I can feel it in a very open kind of channel in my heart space, right in front of my heart, and a kind of settled gut.
So just imagine that you are able to resource yourself in this moment, and not just imagining, but actually you are doing that, and that sort of open channel in your heart going from you grounded and settled in the space in your gut that is so settled and feels so safe, and safe in a way that allows you to access that youthful, innocent, playful, joyful, immediate presence with life. You can feel in this moment that directed towards those people in your most intimate relationships that you mentioned, that you'd like to bring this more into your interactions and your being with them. Maybe just feeling in this moment that sense of what's flowing in your heart from that groundedness, ease in your gut towards them. What I sense I can do to carry this forward into the moments that I will encounter these people in my life over the next few days, even in the midst, right, of life's context, of the busyness and the doingness. And you can feel that around you, and it will be there, right? Can't change that necessarily, but like you can hold this. What I feel would support me, will support me to kind of bridge what I feel, what I felt, what I was resourced with as a little girl with my rock into the moments I have with the people in my life today is.
You can remember to almost like a sense of leaning back, taking a breath, and just really taking them you know, in between, in between the words, in between the moments.
Hmm. But just taking about 3 breaths and just really letting your body feel that feeling, that quality of breath that leans back, the quality of breath that opens up, and the quality of breath that just allows that reception, the reception of what's in front of you, the people. And when you feel ready, just offering your rock a sense of gratitude and bringing yourself gently back to this moment. Thank you, Tanya, for letting me explore that with you a bit. Yeah. So let's just, for those of you who are with us here now and have experienced sort of this little journey and this invitation, if you're comfortable and in a place you can just drop in and close your eyes, or if you're not able to do that, just sort of taking a few breaths, maybe as Tanya's modeled for us, that breath that just leans back, opens up, creates a little more space within the context of the moment you're in. And just feeling that seed plant of what were the ways that you were in relationship with the world in that immediacy when you were younger? What resourced you as a young person? What brought you into a sense of feeling of safety and ease that opened up for that play and joy to emerge? And just letting that seed be there. And in the days and weeks that precede this conversation, just noticing maybe what comes through dream, through quiet moment, what you might notice, a picture, an image you encounter in the world, a poem that comes through you or that you pick up, a song, and just begin to notice sort of how these inquiries that we're making here can weave into your life. And if there's a way that you'd like to share those with us, we'll create some opportunities for that. But just taking that invitation forward if you'd like.
Yeah, I think really we hope to open up the space in such a way that as we come talk about the different things and we move through them, that it's continuously an invitation for inquiry and to engage with the process, really. So we really want this to eventually open up into a more community co-created space. So we would obviously love to hear from you if even already something is stirring. So do reach out, and the different channels will be on the notes of the episode. Because this is the way that we begin to also challenge the dominant narrative. We live in a time of extreme polarities where people are really holding on to their right and making everything else wrong, and there is no space in between. And I think just probably you agree with me that it is because of this, like there is no way forwards because there is no meeting point. And we hope to begin in our little small but hopefully powerful and potent way to open up a space where we can be in a bigger conversation, more nuanced conversation and dialogue, and just curiosity about, how can we welcome all the different experiences? Because how can we welcome the difference? How can we learn from our own experience and the difference we have within ourselves? Because that's part of the work. So I have this part of myself that I just explored, who's very young, very clear, very joyous, very immediate. And then of course I have other parts of myself, like I have a very harsh inner critic, who's got a very different kind of voice. So those differences exist within ourselves, but if we can start to explore those, but also stay open in a space to explore each other's difference. So to be in a space like this requires a few things. It requires us to be brave. It requires us to listen. It can require us to be, or ask of us to be vulnerable. And we just want to set a few sort of agreements in place that as we engage in this space, and hopefully you will engage with us much more as time goes by, and that where we're working from is that we all speak from the I will speak from my experience, because that's the only experience I have. I'm not going to generalize my experience and assume that you, Jessica, have the same experience, or any of you who are listening share my experience. That when I listen, I stay curious, that I'm not going to make assumptions or make conclusions about what you're saying, and that I'm listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond. So this is, for me anyway, such a big one, because so often we're in conversation and we just can't wait to like get our bit in. So we don't even listen to the end of what the other person is saying. Like, I catch myself doing this a lot, and I'm really trying to train myself to kind of be like, okay, what's actually being said? And then you might have to revert, oh, so my response can't be that, because actually what I'm hearing is different to what I assumed I was going to hear. So this is, like how we start to create a space where we can really honor difference, right? And we can share in our difference, and we can be respectful. And really, that what we are at the very center is care, a care for each other, right? So that we're not moving into being right and attached to being right, that we don't need. And also, I think one of the big things is that we have to be okay with there not being simple, easy answers. Right? And as humans, I think we just want to ground into something that's like true and steady and isn't going to change. But of course, what we know, what is that saying? Like the only thing we can rely on for sure is that everything changes. So it's ungrounded to be in this human experience. But, hopefully if we can be with each other more in it, the support is in that way, even if it's not in any kind of absolute understanding. Yeah, do you want to follow on that a little?
I really appreciate that, Tanya, and I know like it's us here now, and the idea, as we've said over and over, is that like to bring other voices in, and I really appreciate just this emphasis on how we are together, right? As being, if we're attentive to that, then we can go to different places than perhaps we've gone before, because one of the things, I think, another couple of assumptions that feel important to lay out is that we live in a culture. I mean, I went and studied community liberation, eco and indigenous psychologies in a program that really starts from a deep questioning of the individualistic assumption that so much of our society is built upon in ways that are oftentimes unquestioned or even unacknowledged. And certainly within the psychological mental health field, there is a citing of the issue within the individual. The problem lies within us, and that we want to open that up here and understand that like we are so deeply, what we experience as ourself is so deeply entangled and implicated in the collective. And that in any given scenario, there are simultaneous perspectives and perceptions and possible interpretations that are happening within us, that are happening between us, that are happening among us, like active through the collective. And that the more that we can kind of attune to that and create space in our way of being open to explore that, the more we can kind of become, I think, like, I love this word, responsible, to how we are implicated in perpetuating collective dynamics that cause suffering that's experienced in the sense of self, and that causes suffering in the experience of collective, generational, intergenerational, harm. And so, we really want to stay within this place that you were talking about so beautifully, is opening up perspectives, and really kind of more and more and more challenging. I mean, I know for me, raised in the educational system, like there is a deep embeddedness, about value being placed in having, a perspective or a perception that is more correct or more, like that, or that fits a certain model or interpretation of the world, right, as being correct. And so continuing like to open up and challenge that, to notice when we're relating to one another, that these patterns of relating are influenced by all of these things that limit our capacity to, as you said, to seek understanding, right? To really seek understanding of the other person's perception, perspective, and interpretation, and seeing that it's like in holding both of those, ours and yours and ours, mine, yours, and ours side by side, something else much richer can emerge. So yeah, I think that, those are the things that feel the most important to me. And like you said, I think one of the things that has been so transformative for me is to recognize that even within one person, right, like you said, there are all of these different aspects of self showing up, and that some of those are perhaps deeply oppositional and contrary to our values, like to what we actually hold dear, to what we actually want to experience within the world and within our relationships. So it's just like, again, like going back to what you're saying, I guess I'm feeling into ways that I am, that it's been essential for me to apply like the things you were talking about, like that curiosity, that curiosity about what are these perspectives that are asserting. And it happens most often in, moments of activation, right? When we feel something very strongly and something hits on something that draws up from the past conditioning. So just marking that these are kinds of the ways we'll be continuing to hone in on our own experience and then trying to open it up from there.
Yeah, I just, in response to that, because it's really this, I think, as without, so within. And this is not to say, oh, if you see something in the world, it's just a reflection of yourself. I think with that, there can be some issues around those ideas, but more that the more that we can get skilled and stay engaged with kind of looking at the different aspects of us within us, then between us and the world, and then the world at large. So like this idea of noticing something, naming it, and not just continuing to be making assumptions. So for instance, like, okay, so I am moving as a person within the world, and I have a certain identity which is going to shape my experience of the world. So if I start to have some relationship to that, I'm also going to hopefully have an understanding that, okay, so this is me, this is why we speak from the I, because my experience, right? So what are some of those things? So for instance, I'm a white woman, I'm middle-aged, I'm heterosexual, cisgendered, I am middle class background, I live in a country where I'm not a citizen, I don't have a religion, like there are so many things that just in the way that the world meets me and I meet the world, right, that is going to shape my experience. And if I can, and then I can relate to, so in the dominant narrative, how much am I seeing my story being centered? Well, actually quite a lot from the experience that I come from in many ways, right? And then there's other ways where I'm not, like, so I have a lot of privileges. I have power in a lot of ways, in some ways less so, but we don't need to go into those details, but just starting to kind of orient in that way with the world is, going to give me a great, maybe not assume that my experience is going to be the same as the next person, and understand that if I had more marginalized identities, I would experience the world totally different. So, but I feel like doing the inner work in that way, as within, so without, if I can, within the inner work I do, also have a relationship, like I mentioned before, between the different parts of myself and different parts of my woundings. Okay, so yes, I'm shaped by society and meet society through different ways. And also my family culture will have been shaped me in some way. And the wounds, whatever the dynamics, whatever the circumstances have been in my childhood will shape me. So I'm going to act from those places. And the more I can be conscious of those places as well, then hopefully I can be more accountable, more, I love this, response able, and find a bit of space to not always move in the same patterns if they are not helpful, that they're just conditioned into my being. And I think this is where it's exciting, because that is really the transformative practice. And weave with different, like for me, very much the embodied practices is coming into relationship with that, and with how I feel and how I meet the world. And then might have more contemplative practices, and then you have things like the understanding the bigger stories with archetypes and myth, and then seeing the bigger cosmos with astrology, and how we're like pulsing with this greater whole. Personally, I think all the practices, all the tools, all the maps, bring them on, because I know I need them. But I think just the beginning of like starting to even identify, so you have a bit of space so you can see something more clearly. If you want to, how that.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's like that relationship between responsibility and responsibility, right? I think each of us understanding that we are so deeply implicated and responsible to whatever degree for our part in what's happening, in our personal lives, in our collective experience, and our capacity to, and I do think like with the self-awareness, self-reflexivity means to call into question, to inquire within, to challenge the notions that we have as we're talking about, and to challenge the feelings that we have, the patterns that we lean into, to challenge the comforts that we have, right? And the way that our privilege is, providing an ease of pathway, and for some of us, and the ways that are, moving uncritically, right, through those pathways perpetuates, an unequal distribution of ease and access, right? And that, it's about like the little ways that we can all recognize how we are shaping our personal lives, and the spaces that we're in our professional lives, in our communities, that we enter ourselves. And so, our hope is that, in this space, we can be in both inquiries. We can really hold with care and tenderness and a total commitment what we experience as our personal wounds and our personal suffering and our personal hopes and dreams, but not to the exclusion of our collective wounds, but to the inclusion of our collective wounds and our collective hopes and dreams. And that is like really what moves me to create this space with you, because I have felt the potential in the spaces that we've participated in together to make that, to bridge those things, which I felt such a need for so many years in healing and transformation spaces that I entered. So I'm just really grateful that we can stay in that and keep the conversation inclusive in that way, because what we're really wanting to engender here is greater freedom personally and collectively, greater joy, greater intimacy and wholeness and connection, and that it really is through being accountable and in relationship with all these different aspects of ourselves, with care, with compassion, with curiosity, and applying that self-reflexivity to be more response able to how we're shaping things. And I think that, one of the things that I would venture to say is, because we've talked about it enough, that has come through both of our experiential journeys of pursuing healing and transformation, is that through fully engaging what challenges us and our conditioning, as opposed to being in practices that allow us to bypass. I mean, some of those can be spiritual technologies or other things that can help to relieve the discomfort without having us lean into the discomfort and learn what the discomfort teaches us and be able to respond differently to these parts of ourselves and these parts of our society that perpetuate the discomfort, in order to really attend to the source of it rather than just ameliorate the discomfort of it in the moment. And so, yeah, that we can keep continuing to open it up and shift it. So that feels pretty complete for me on those things.
Thank you. Yeah. So as we come to this part here, it'd be great to just, if you can, moments. So depending on where you might be as you listen to this, obviously, if you're driving or on the move, stay safe, keep your eyes open. But if you're in a place where you can just softly close your eyes and sort of settle into, whether it's your seat or into your feet, depending on where you are, but just take a breath and simply notice what's present in your body. If you can get a sense of the energy that's present as you've been listening. And I will offer, as Jessica guided me before, a few sentence stems, so incomplete sentences. And depending on the environment that you're in, as I begin, you can maybe even speak out loud the most immediate that comes to finish the sentence for you, and or just inwardly sit with it, whatever is most appropriate. As I feel my breath move in and out, what I notice most in my body is my sense of this physical feeling is that it comes from part of myself I really wish to remember is one thing that I can do in the next few hours or days to connect to this part of myself is feel your body breathing. One more sentence. Beyond circumstance, location, and identity, I am. Let yourself take a slightly fuller breath in now. And exhale out. You might bring the palms to touch. Let your head and neck relax a little bit. Maybe you rub your palms together. Create some heat between the hands if that feels good. You can place your hands once they're really nice and hot over your heart, or maybe you run your palms down the legs into your feet just to have a sense of coming back into your body, or maybe give your body a bit of a squeeze, your shoulders a squeeze, just making sure that you feel yourself fully here in this beautiful, beautiful body of yours where you are. So thank you so much for being here. And we hope that you feel excited about sort of exploring all these different ways of being and creating and relating and collaborating and, just being with the hardship, being with the challenges, sitting with it, sharing in it, engaging the differences, the beautiful differences that we have. And that you feel excited that maybe we can co-create something new in this space. And you are totally invited to share with us at any time. And if you feel like there is somebody who might be interested in what is happening in this space, please invite them in and share the conversation with them, bring them into the fold. We are really excited to be here with you, and we will see you in the next episode as we continue really to lay the foundations for the future.
Thank you, Tanya.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your presence in this space. If you sense that friends, family, or peers would benefit from leaning in, please share.
If an episode speaks to you in a particularly meaningful way or raises questions that you would like to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can connect with us here on Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram at leaning_in_.
Leaning In is produced by Tanya Mikwitz and Jessica Lusty. The beautiful music you hear here is provided by Masood Ali Khan. Our sound engineer is Marley Mikwitz Montgomery.